to today's edition of Pegasus Test. On today's edition, we're going to talk about the One Shepherd Alpha Company Fall 2022 semester out at CMTC in Missouri. And I've invited Dr. Larson here today because I wanted to give another view of this FTX. If you watch my video, that I'll put a link somewhere here at the end of the video, and it's my point of view, and all the video is from my side because I was the patrol leader. So I have no concept other than what I heard in the AAR and talking with the other patrol's leader after the fact. But Dr. Larson here was an OC, so he has the perspective of the OC watching the battle unfold. He also has the perspective as he went out in the field with the other side, so he can tell you what they were doing and how that affected them and their decisions, and also what was gained as students and teachers out of this FTX. So what we're going to do here is, if you have not seen my video, please stop here, go watch my video so you understand my side, because we want to talk about what the OPFOR did, not what my BLUFOR did for the most part. I will interject from time to time when it's relevant to certain key points of the story, but for the most part, Doc here is going to tell you what the OPFOR was doing, what their plans were, what their missions were, and what lessons were learned. Doc, take it away.
Hey, yeah, no, I appreciate that, and you know, back in the day we did more and more of this. We did it in written form. We've gotten away from that for many, many years, but both the PL and APL of the OPFOR and the PL and the APL of BLUFOR would collaborate together to write out their own AAR from the command perspective, and then they would share that with the community, those two documents, so that people could kind of put it together. And so that's in that same tradition or in that same nature. It's kind of what we're doing here, just without the other teams, you know, command team. I mean, that would be Kyle Jensen was the patrol leader of your opposition. And so first off, just that. Secondly, I'll point out that I can offer a perspective from the school perspective. And though we really don't tout this a lot, Les certainly knows it's true that from a school perspective, we want two things that seem diametrically opposed, right? So we're playing both ends against each other, and you're saying, oh, the OPFOR and the BLUFOR. Well, more than you know. And the reason I say that is we want every warrior. I don't care if you're a Jundee rifleman all the way up to the platoon sergeant, platoon leader. We want everybody invested in, quote unquote, the win. All right. Now, the caveat that they're given is, hey, they know that in the military, you're given a squad leader, you're given a fire team leader. You don't get to pick those. They're assigned because they're this rank and they've been assigned to this unit. And they're on the roster. In a similar sort of vein, in One Shepherd, we don't have that because we're not a militia. We don't have a real world mission. Our only mission is learning. But we mimic that by saying, okay, you know, Smith is ready to be a fire team leader. You know, Black is ready to be a squad leader, and Johnson is ready to be, you know, either platoon sergeant or platoon leader. And so they're told, yeah, you got to play these guys in that role. You can't rack and stack your A team. Hey, man, this is going to be our greatest team. I'm going to rack and stack, and we're going to kick their butt. No, I'm sorry, you can't do that. These people have to be given their opportunity to lead because we are a leadership institute. And so the point here is that we want everybody entering the FTX at the end of each semester. There is a 3-day nonstop FTX. We want you entering that and ready to win. But the dirty little secret is the staff and cadre, they don't give a damn who wins. They don't. We want you to learn. And we know that you're going to probably learn more by failing than by being successful. And so you have to have that perspective too. What's going on inside the school and our learning outcomes. It's not just about the mission. Whereas Les, as the PL of that semester and that FTX, was very much focused on what's the mission, how do I win? How do I win? How do my warriors on my patrol win? How do we crush the enemy? How do we keep the enemy from winning, right? And that's what they're supposed to be doing. Both sides are supposed to be investing themselves. So, that said, you know...
I can interject for just a moment.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Because there's one part that should be covered, and this is for the benefit of the students that attended this FTX. You could look at the roster and say, my side was rigged. I'm the Bravo company commander. I'm out at Alpha. I'm leading a patrol. My assistant patrol leader is my armorer from Bravo company. My first team leader is my logistics officer from Bravo company. I had a good command team. That being said, there was a very specific reason to do that. Actually, a twofold reason. One is cadre development. I wanted to exercise my team together. So this was comradeship building and team building amongst us, a very laudable goal. So at Bravo Company, we're working together better, and we're seeing it from our students' perspective. The second thing was, with the mix of students that had come to that particular semester, it just so happens those leadership spots were open. It was no tent to rack, stack, or game. Those leadership spots were open, and it made the most sense for us to fill those spots.
Yeah, there's that chance and circumstance. Who's in what we call the leadership hopper? Who's in the hopper depends on many different factors, not the least of which is who registered for that semester. And so we had two opportunities here. First opportunity, as Les has just said, is that we did not have enough people in the senior, what we call primary leadership positions. We had a lot of people signed up and registered. We had full,
It was a full attendance.
it was a full
yeah.
attendance, but the issue was like a sellout semester, but the issue was there weren't enough people to play that role of, PL and APL, so we got to divvy that up. The second thing that happened, and this doesn't always happen, is that the two people that were ready for the PL and APL position, and this was their first time at both of those positions, let's just say that they, we're going to have our better performers and our medium performers and our lower performers. Well, long story short, these guys were two very, very good performers. I mean, they were stellar. So, in spite of the fact that this being their first crack in that position, this isn't their first leadership. And this isn't their first FTX. I mean, they're pretty experienced dudes. And we said, yeah, okay, that gives a lot more balance. And so they came in and they're exercising against it. Now, the last thing I'm going to say about this is that in addition to doing the after-action review, where both the Blue 4 and Op 4 come together over a hot lunch at the end of 3 days of fighting, and they go through about an hour to an hour and a half after-action review together where they share. Immediately after that, going through PMCS and everything, we bring the primary leaders in and we do what's called a murder board. And so I have to be careful that I'm not sharing information from that murder board. That said, what I can share with you are comments that the OCs said to each other. We share information, observer controllers, and we are previously instructors, and then we play the role of observer controller. And these are comments that we're making to each other because we take turns rotating in and out of the FTX and making sure that we see something from the Blue 4 side of it and the Op 4 side of it. And again, we compare notes. And so what I'll share with you here are those notes that we compared. And my observations. And so then I'll jump in that the Kyle Jensen was the Op 4. So he was wearing ODs. His team was wearing ODs. There you go. Les was wearing the Woodland because he was the Blue 4. As a general rule of thumb, this isn't always true, but in most measles, that's master scenario event list. That's what the road to war, this is the story behind the mission, right, for 3 days. And in most measles, the Op 4 is invading of something. Like they're the bad guys. They're the aggressors. And so that was certainly the case here. They don't believe they're the bad guys. They've got a completely legitimate political view about why they're doing what they're doing, right? So they're motivated, and Jensen went in on day one into an area, and you'll have to share the map overlay, if you will.
Right, I'll put the map overlay in here while we're talking.
Right.
And if you could start off what the Op 4's mission was, because they stepped off a full hour before I did by design, and there
Right.
was a practical reason to that, but there was a mission reason to it as well.
Right. They were told, hey, we found a gap in an enemy line, a large gap, what we believe to be a large gap. We need you to go into this area and figure out what the heck is there. So it's a reconnaissance in force kind of mission. That is, go find the enemy, get in a fight with the enemy. You heard that right. Watch my video on reconnaissance in force. It's not reconnaissance sneaky stuff. This is go get in a fight and see how the enemy responds. That's what they were told to do. And so they invaded a space that was actually Blue 4 territory. And then Blue 4 responded because little did the Op 4 know that there was a critical asset up north in that AO, and Blue 4 had to then respond and go, oh my God, get these guys in here in a blocking position. Okay? So once the enemy was detected, Blue 4 reacted by then sending in an element to block and protect that northern asset. Once again, that asset was in the AO, but the Op 4 weren't privy to that. All they were told was, we think this is a gap in their line, in their defensive line. Okay.
And let me illustrate here, because it would be an injustice to both sides to not point this out. Both sides were given incredibly scant information. They were told to do movement to contact, which was the whole point of the STX earlier in this semester.
Yep.
And that's what STX is, generate scenarios into the FTX for those who don't know.
Correct.
So they were just told basically go do movement to contact in an area. I was given had an area pointed to me on the map, said set your patrol base in this vicinity, deny the enemy use of this area.
That's it. Pretty much it.
All I got.
And that is not a normal, I don't want to give you the impression that that's a normal briefing to our command teams, but sometimes some measles are written very nebulous. Like, we don't know what's going on here. I need you to go develop the situation for us and tell us what's there. And so both of them were given kind of blinds of, hey, we don't know what's going on, go find out. And so this is very much, they were both doing that. Now, the critical difference between Les's leadership style and Jensen's leadership style, they were just two diametrically opposed leadership styles. Les will push in harder, faster, and assume more risk. Jensen's style is far more conservative, and it's more diligent pace, like deliberate pacing. He doesn't want to be pushed. He wants to mitigate risk. And if you say one is right and one is wrong, I'm going to disagree. I think a classic case, and the OC said this, they said, Jensen is, and we've seen this before, this isn't the first time we see it, so we recognize it pretty quick. We said, oh, he's a General Bernard Montgomery. Now, some of you know General Bernard Montgomery from World War II, British fame, North Africa, and then later into the Western theater of Europe. And he was hated and loved. A lot of his superiors and peers could not stand him, partly because he was a bit of a megalomaniac, and also because he was a bit caustic, right? He didn't rub people the right way and didn't attempt to.
Which, by the way, are none of Jensen's qualities. He's a great guy.
No, you're right. That's
great guy.
Yeah, I'm talking Bernard Montgomery. No, Jensen is not like that at all. But what he does have in common was that Montgomery was a bit of a product of World War I, where, lions led by lambs and just led into slaughter, and he swore that off and said, I will never do that. You can see this when he takes over the Northern Africa campaign. If you say, yeah, okay, so he plays it safe and he's going to get all the assets in place and mitigate the enemy's advantages, and then he's going to attack, and this is slow and painful. Yes, it is. But two things you need to know. As much as this pissed off his superiors and his peers, first off, it was successful, and his men tended to adore him for that, because they knew if he asked hardship of them, he was going to make sure he did not throw them into a meat grinder if he could avoid it. And they really respected him and felt that he respected them. And so he was adored by the troops he led. Keep that in mind. Secondly, if you're real quick to be dismissive of that leadership style of tactician, keep in mind that Sun Tzu says this: first win the battle, then fight the battle. So you can say that it's not wrong to be the Montgomery style of leadership isn't wrong. Jensen is not the first that we've seen come through One Shepherd that developed that. But I will say that it is more careful. It's more deliberate. It seeks to mitigate risks. And in fact, he has wonderful success day one, because he goes into Shoebox from a southerly approach. He ties up all the roads. He puts security teams on the high-speed avenues of approach. He puts security teams north, viewing the open fields, looking north, and systematically does not a movement to contact so much as it is a zone reconnaissance of the southern side of the entire AO.
And I'll put a map up of that right here so you understand this area.
He ties up, bottlenecks up the southern third of that AO, and with a very tiny team, I mean, this is too big for his team, and he does it brilliantly. The sun sets, and he's feeling pretty confident, but what happens is then overnight, by the sunrise the next morning, Blue 4 also gets a vote in this process, and they had then circumvented his security teams and re-entered into Shoebox just at a time that he starts pushing his system north. And so the rest of day 2 is spent with Blue 4 kind of undoing his first day success.
To interject for just a moment, one, this is why it's really key to go watch my video so you understand the actions I took. I'll put the graphic up again of our movement, but in a nutshell, what I did quickly is in the position that I had and the contact that I didn't have, or I should say the one significant contact I did have, and what that told me is that I decided to withdraw back to the FOB, take transport, resupply, rearm, insert completely in the enemy's rear, cut off his lines of supply back to his homeland, and then proceed at him from a direction that I suspected he would not expect me to come from. And like I said, go watch the previous video if you haven't already to get a really detailed description of this.
Okay, so the rest of that is not being aware yet that his rear had been cut off from his line of communication, which is a line of support. He literally had radio communication back, so that wasn't a problem. But he was not aware of this, and so he now, with the confidence that he's secured this area, Jensen pushes north, and he pushes north to do what he's supposed to do. Not only reconnaissance and develop the situation, but movement to contact. Now his movement to contact bumps into essentially nothing. So he pushes out further reconnaissance and then sees the enemy asset all the way north in it. He reports this, so he does a good job. He's completing his mission, but he doesn't realize he's been cut off. As a matter of fact, I don't think he realizes it till the end of day 2 when he goes back into a patrol base.
I'm going to stop and correct you there, Doc.
Okay.
He did realize early on, if you watch my video,
right,
as we were occupying our patrol base, we encountered an element from them.
That is right. I remember
that was
yeah.
doing a water resupply,
that is right.
And it just happened their water resupply was called in at the exact point we inserted. But they found us at the wrong time, because as I engaged that 2 little man reconnaissance element and basically fired to scare them off, my main force was occupying the patrol base. Now they reacted fairly quickly. They hit us while we were establishing the patrol base. I wouldn't say we were completely set yet. We were set well enough to repel said attack. Again, in my previous
That's
video
right.
I go into detail. But at that point, he's discovered that his
That's
line
right.
of communication is cut.
And that's pretty late in the day on day 2.
That's happening right around lunchtime. We are setting up patrols when we get hit. I'd say it's about 1300.
Okay.
And then through the night, it's just a game of cat and mouse.
Okay, so, and I could be wrong, I wish Jensen was here because the exact sequence, isn't that important, but he could refine it for me, because I want to say about the time he discovers, oh crap, there's people behind me, he had completed his movement to contact, but had reconnaissance teams pushed even farther north. So they hadn't come back and said, hey, we found this enemy asset yet. So he's trying to decide what to do when, lo and behold, later in the day, they return and say, hey man, we found this asset. And he's like, okay, this does change the ball of wax. Now he's feeling more confident that, well, I found what I came to look for, but unfortunately, the enemy's behind me. So, so what happens is, day 2, basically the sun sets and we're into nighttime operations, and he's trying to make up his mind, what do we do now? I've got good intel on this area, I've developed the situation as I'm supposed to, I've reported all of that, but now I'm cut off from my line of support. And I've got to re-establish that line of support. I got bad guys in here, and in theory, at least potentially, what's going to happen is the OPFOR is going to send a massive invasion into this gap, right? but that's no longer a gap because we have enemy assets and enemy maneuver elements, and so now he's got to develop that. So what happens is he goes into a planning cycle there in the dark, and then I think at O Dark 30 he decides, okay, I'm going to try and move against the enemy's position. So he's going to go down there and try to clear open this so that he can report to his command, hey, I've got to clear open. I don't remember exactly what happens, but he does not make contact. So what we've got is, we're at the morning of day 3.
Well, let me interject.
And we've only had a couple of really scant light shots at each
now,
other.
to Jensen's credit, once his unit reported I was there, he did attack. I'm going to say roughly half his force because we got 8 kills. I think we wiped the force out, maybe except for one guy. And that gave me the confidence to stay put where I was at.
Okay.
I've easily repelled an enemy attack with minimal casualties. I'm sitting aligned his lines of communication. I have a great defensible position. Him smashing into me is not the world's worst thing. Also, I'm thinking with my black hat on, the goal of this exercise is to do movement to contact.
Mm-hmm.
He has to movement to contact to find me. You know, movement to contact is generally a tactic you use when you're not sure where the enemy is, but it can be used when you know exactly where the enemy is.
Yeah, under certain circumstances, right.
Right.
Which is how I think he bumped into your team then, because again, he bumped into you at the water resupply,
Yeah.
very much unintended, then pushed a movement to contact down,
Yep.
bumped into a harder contact, then fell back with that information and said, okay, you know, I'm going to maneuver at night, or, you know, last waning hours of nighttime. I'm going to use that to maneuver into space and then produce another movement to contact so that we can go into the fight. But you guys weren't where they expected for whatever reason. There was no contact made, not the least of which is you guys then were told you received a message, go find them and
In the
clear them
dawn,
out.
yeah, we were told to go find them.
Mm-hmm.
And and I talk about this in my video, and I know I keep referring to that, but just as a quick thing, we're listening to the enemy all night long. We've run into a patrol at one point, and it was a soft contact. Both sides saw each other, both sides retreated. I don't know what Kyle's orders were to his troops. Mine were establish soft contact without being detected, maintain that contact. If you're detected, come on home. My patrol leader felt he was detected. He came on back to the patrol base. Turns out we found out in the AR he was detected. So kudos to my whiskey team leader, Zulu team leader for making the correct decision.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, then Kyle started taking a series of actions. We were listening all into the radio. I had achieved essentially what I wanted to do with with that patrol, what I intended to do with the second patrol, which is to go to where I thought they were, fire them up, keep them up all night. Well, they were doing that to themselves, so I just went into a rest cycle. But at the same token, I used that to plan, and the soft contact where it occurred made me think the enemy's where I think they're at. Each time I thought where the enemy was at, he was. There's a little dispute over that. But my first time where I had contact on the first night, the next day when we went to that spot during the daylight, they say it was an LPOP. There was enough trash there to indicate it was a squad-sized position.
Mm-hmm.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
The next time with the contact, the next night, that soft contact where it occurred, I was like, the enemy has to be here on the map, and I'll put a graphic up of that. Turns out the next morning when I set up my plan, I'm going to that spot in force with a standard movement to contact of 2 up, 1 back. And sure enough, the enemy patrol base was exactly where I thought it would be.
Now, they were gone. They were gone at that point because, again, before first light, you know, I want to say an hour, hour and a half before first light, if I recall correctly, Jensen had his patrol up, and they were out looking for, and they were conducting yet another movement to contact. And this, I think, is the weakness of the, the conservative style. If this had been a deliberate attack, he would have understood where the enemy was. That's when you conduct a deliberate attack, is when you have good intel on where they are and what their assets are and what their condition is. That Montgomery style worked for Bernard Montgomery, and I've seen it work for people inside of patrol leaders, inside of One Shepherd. I've seen that work repeatedly. In fact, you've been on the receiving end of it when another warrior who was very much the same style, and it was doing a deliberate attack and waited for all the assets to come into its favor and only then attacked. And we're talking hours and hours, a day and a half later or something like this is when he finally friggin' attacked, right? Because he's very deliberate. You can see this work on the defense. You can see this work many different times. Unfortunately for Jensen, and this was his first time as PL, we are a school, he is supposed to be learning. Unfortunately for him, that leadership style, or that tactic style, I should say, the leadership was fine. His troops were very high morale. But the tactic being that conservative, this is not what movement to contact and reconnaissance and force. This was using a movement to contact to conduct a reconnaissance and force, which requires incredible risk. And it requires a whole lot of assumption of risk taking and also being comfortable with a nebulous environment where you can't button everything up constantly and control down. It's too big of an area. And he was still trying to do that, so he's being so slow and careful that not only did he not make contact with the enemy, but the enemy, once again, quite, like two ships in the night, right? The enemy picks up and bypasses him, because again, it's too big of an area. It's not Jensen's fault. But the enemy bypasses him and goes and finds his patrol base and basically sacks it and says, well, now I've got it. And of course, he's still out here doing a movement to contact. At that point, Les calls up the white cell and, says, hey man, we've reached culmination. We can go until like 11 o'clock in the morning on that Saturday and then end exercise. But he says, we've reached culmination. I'm not sure what else I have to, I'm in a good position.
Yeah, my intention was, as the leader, notionally, I have burned my enemy's supplies. I occupy him. He's now down in the southern AO. I've contained him.
Yep.
With reinforcements. I could easily drive him out of my land.
So full stop. We could have ended there. And by the way, if you think that the OCs weren't talking about this, absolutely. White cell, I was in the white cell. We called the red cell, the blue cell. We said, hey, they're calling culmination. Are you seeing that? All OCs are reporting back, yeah, it's culminated, dude. This is over. And what time is it? Maybe 7 o'clock in the morning?
It's 08 at the latest.
Yeah, I don't even think it's that. I think it's just
latest.
Yeah, it's not. Point is, it's way early. Can we culminate? Can we index here? Yes, we can. And what we were told by everybody is, all the parties we checked, yeah, this is culminated. The problem is that we had very, very light. Guys were going, basic load of 7 mags, right? LSW gunners, basic load of 10 mags. Everybody's coming back with
half their ammo or more.
Half.
The one big firefight is when they sent into my patrol base as I was setting up. It was a short but sharp firefight, but that was the most rounds expended.
And so guys are telling me, hey man, they're still on their first mag. They may have transitioned because you take a half mag. Why go into a battle with a half mag? But the point was, I was being told out of 7 mags, most riflemen are coming back with 6.5 mags here. So there's something else coming out of this school, and that is, here's the dirty word. Oh no, wait, it's a 4-letter word. You're gonna have to censor this, on
oh dear.
Yeah, on YouTube. The word is the F word, fun. So, oh my God, what? One Shepherd leverages fun. Not only do we leverage fun in learning, I'm going to argue that until you're having fun, you're not getting deep enough learning. And I'll actually take that to the bank. I've been saying this. Look, my PhD is in education, okay? And I'm not the first to say this, and I won't be the last to say this. There's too much, it's admittedly nascent, but there's too much evidence that until you have fun, you haven't got the deepest levels of learning. So I'm not only not apologetic for it, oh, it's so unprofessional. I'm very fiercely proud of this, that at One Shepherd we have fun.
And we've got to the purpose of this video.
Right.
Because there was a slight breakdown in communication at
Well,
this
it wasn't
point.
a breakdown in communication. It's actually something I'm going to give a hat tip to Winter Forge, S&S.
No, but at the time.
There was a breakdown in
at the time,
communication.
And the thing is, I'm sitting there going, I've won.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in my enemy's patrol base. I even call out my enemy on his own radio and say, come and get me.
Which is fine, by the way. So what we had to do as a school is we're like, okay, look, but we want guys to have the fun. We actually have had the FTX that never happened. That's years ago. We all tell lores about the FTX that never happened. And it's an FTX that very much happened, but the two teams never shot at each other for a full 3 days. And they saw each other. They were in close proximity. They were doing all this wonderful stuff. No one denies that there was great learning there, but everybody felt like a little let down that, they're in there cleaning weapons and turning ammo in and never really got a chance to shoot at a bad guy. So, so we said, hey, we don't want that to happen again. Let's make sure we go ahead and just take a couple of hours to have some fun. Now, in Winter Forge, and I don't want to give away the whole thing, but they have a concept. I'll say S&S has created this concept, and we didn't have that in One Shepherd. We do now, of a soft index and a hard index. A hard index is pick up all your stuff, get back into the fob, let's do this AAR and start PMCS on the weapons and gear and all this other stuff. That's a hard index. Get your rucks back on and let's go. But they had a concept of a soft index. A soft index is, okay, this part of the training has ended, but we want to do something extra here and go just a little farther for an entirely different learning outcome. And so there's a soft index, that measle is ended, but let's go do this other thing. And so we haven't had that in One Shepherd, and I'm telling you right here, right now, One Shepherd, and Les knows this, everybody knows this, we continue to improve our process. We are not perfect, we don't pretend to be perfect, and we continue to do process improvement, curriculum improvement, and everything else.
As leaders, we have a learning point here that we learned.
Right.
And the scenario was completed.
Yes.
At this point, Pinelandia and Rotania have fought. Pinelandia has successfully defended its territory. But there was still the lesson of movement to contact to teach. And there hadn't been a true movement to contact in the whole thing. Because a usual One Shepherd semester, usually, there are exceptions to the rule, will have one force start out doing the tactic and the other defending against it. And then about somewhere in the midpoint, or when it makes perfect sense, it switches over. The other side starts doing that tactic, and the side that was doing it starts defending against it. It's
Okay.
the nature of the beast.
So I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there and say that, in fact, you conducted an approach march movement to contact the day before, and it was very well done. The 2 forward, 1 back. That's a classic approach march technique in movement
But
to
it
contact.
did. You're right. It did, but it didn't result in a fight.
That's
And
right. There was
the
no
thing.
fight, and they
There's
did
a-
the search and attack method the first day in
There was
Shoebox.
no fight.
But there was no fight.
We
And
needed to have the fight. That was the spice that was missing
right.
and stuff. And so that's what was decided to be done. And I was not privy to that because I was the patrol leader, not a black hat, being an OC.
Right.
And
So what I would now say in the future when that comes up, our OCs will say, have you reached culmination? Yeah, this guy's culminated. Yeah, this guy's culminated. But we have this other learning. And in this case, it was a gun battle we wanted to get into. These guys really haven't gotten to a gun battle. They're all loaded for bear. Can we do a soft index on this scenario and then just let them have some fun here, crash them in together? And that's what should have been communicated. That intent was exactly what all the OCs understood. Our problem was that neither one of the command teams, the Blue 4 command team or the Op 4 command team, understood this. And they're like, both of them are going, look,
Well, to be blatant, we were going, what the fuck are we doing here?
Yes, exactly. Because even Jensen was saying, okay, I've lost all my shit up there in my patrol base, but I've got my people intact. They're alive. And we've achieved the objective that my commander gave me to do, which was discover what is here. I not only discovered there's a maneuver element here, but there is this critical asset. So now he's given all of his people, his higher command, all the information they need to know, either, yes, I am attacking there, or no, we're not going to attack there. He feels like he's done, even though he's lost his rucksack and spare radios and stuff. Like, well, that's, operational security compromise. He knows he's lost that game, but he's still here in a tactical element and still very capable, and he could have just gone away. And so he, too, is thinking, why would I go north again? So both of the command teams were saying, this fight makes no sense and it's not something I want. And that's on the OCs, because we simply didn't say, okay, this is a soft index, your measle is done. From this point, this is what we will cover the last hours all the way up to this moment. That's what we'll cover in the AAR. What's going to happen next isn't even part of the AAR. This is just an additional thing we want you to go do, whatever that is. In this case, it was just go have fun and shoot
Well,
it
the
up.
cool thing is, learning was achieved for this. And for me, I got to conduct, for the first time in my military experience, the perfect hasty ambush. And it's hard to see. We do have video on it and stuff. I'll try to insert a clip here. But what happened is we saw the enemy first. we saw a big element of them. And I was able to get my maneuver positions online, used the proper hand and arm signals, literally gave a countdown till when we opened fire. And I know we got a bunch of them in the first burst.
Yeah, and I gotta say, that is something, because I'm not joking. I've done a lot of ambushes in my life and career and all this other stuff. Most ambushes, the vast majority, net zero, right? A hasty ambush, my God, I really only have maybe, I know one. They stick out, they're so friggin' rare. A successful hasty ambush is so rare. There's one that sticks out in my mind with the Rakkasans and the 101st, and I think if I think long enough and hard enough, I could probably come up with one example of that in One Shepherd. But we're 42 years old, right?
Yeah, it was a very unique
extremely
thing.
rare. Yeah.
It was a very unique thing. And also the second thing that came out of it, as I had the wonderful thing, after I was taken out of the fight and got killed, I denied my resurrection. I gave it to another troop, and then I went into YouTuber mode, took my cameras, and just walked around the battlefield. This is where you see most of the footage in there, but if you pay close attention towards the end of the video, I've crossed lines. I've now linked up with Jensen, and I'm following his guys.
Oh, I wondered how you got that footage.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how you did that.
So I've done that, because now two reasons for doing this. One, the guilty pleasure is I'm getting footage for my channel. The other one is to give junior leaders a chance to lead in the fight.
Yeah.
But it also, this gave a training benefit to the other side, because if you'll see in my footage, Kyle's clearly leading his forces effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And it also gave him a great opportunity, because quirk of fate, no other than just where the clock of the arm was on the clock at the time, we both had instant respawns, but when ours were used up, I had an hour to go for my Blue 4. Kyle got his instantly.
Boom.
So he effectively got double the number of respawns.
Yes, he
so right at the point where he needed them, he got fully reinforced, and that changed the tide of battle.
Mm-hmm.
And he effectively used them, and he did what we want our leaders to do. He led with his troops. He used his troops as his weapon. Pay attention to the video. He's not firing his weapon. Occasionally he takes a shot, but he's not in the fight. He's telling people what to do, where to go, where he wants them, where he needs them to be. And this is also a purpose of this video, is we've learned at One Shepherd now that with this soft index type thing, that we can go get the learning objective in, we just have to communicate it better.
Yeah.
And I think now by having that fight, which I was not happy with at the time, that we got the learning objective accomplished, because while we did movement to contact for sure, both sides did it, movement to contact and movement to contact with contact are two very different command experiences.
They are. They very much are. And I think that's, there is the fun factor, and I'm not backing down from that one iota, but as you said, it's more than just fun. Everybody's, I don't care if you're an LSW gunner or a carbine guy or the RTO, you are going, oh my gosh, this feels so much different. You set it up and you think, well, our plan is going to go perfect because we're using this tactic perfectly, and then the enemy starts pushing back, and chance and circumstance and Mother Nature gets involved, and so you find out, well, this is absolute chaos, and I'm trying to, I focus our chaos against their chaos, and yeah, I mean, it feels so much different, and it's, this is leadership under stress, so you're adding that element in, so yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah. It was a good thing, and I'm very appreciative Doc came out to have this video with me, because I felt really guilty putting up my video with no chance to give the OPFOR their side of the story, and it's the tyranny of distance. Most of those guys on the OPFOR are located out there in the Midwest. I'm here on the East Coast. It's really hard to link up, even doing it by Zoom or Teams or whatever. So Doc had this overview that was unique, and I wanted to get that out there for the viewer.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, like I said, this is a long, proud tradition that, the command team's coming and doing their after-action review, after-action report. And so this is not a text-based one, but this is a video-based one. Yeah, no, that was actually great input. Would have made this better, of course, is having Jensen, who's up in Wisconsin. We're down in Virginia right now, and he's Wisconsin. It's just the nature of One Shepherd is that we have people quite literally from all over the world that participate in our school. So, but it's still a cool tradition, and it's a great way just to think through things. And so, Jensen, jump in the comments.
We'd like to thank everybody for tuning in for this today. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and tune in for future One Shepherd coverage.